I Father Fred said that he so appreciated being able to meet with us and collect his thoughts around our topic for really the first time, even with his incredibly extensive background that we all know he has. So it's been a pure pleasure to work on this. I just want to make a comment before we move on that I do know that there are some other people that wanted to come today who probably haven't been able to make it or get in. So we look forward to this presentation being posted so that the folks who aren't here will be able to enjoy this presentation kind of along with us at a different time. And it's almost like that's kind of a segue to this presentation that has to do with, among other things, space and time, I think.
You could do that.
You ready for Father Fred for being here with us? Take it away.
We have to. This is St. Boniface is home to my wife Denise and me, as you know, when I'm not being called out to supply or do some other project or travel to see family. And so it's a double pleasure just to spend a little time with you in this particular format. And I am working on Zoom is a challenge. I work with a Zoom group on Monday mornings, and it's never really been a challenge, but you know, sometimes these IT things crimp us a little bit. What I wanted, the way I introduced this, and what you probably saw in what was printed out, is I asked the question: Is spirituality in the life of prayer a linear thing, you know, two-dimensional, or is it a 3 or 4-dimensional experience or operation? And we don't give much thought to that. And I started thinking about this lots of years ago, probably in my second parish, when my senior warden in that parish, who was a great friend and a very smart guy, if he started a vestry meeting as the senior warden with a prayer, if I asked him to do that, his prayer always started with, "Dear God up in heaven." And so finally, I asked him one day over lunch, I said, "Where's up? Where is up in heaven?" He says, "Up there somewhere." And I said, "What if I told you that that might not be the case?" He said, "I would be destroyed." Because we have this sense that the divine, the Holy One, God, as we understand God, is somewhere up there, away from us. That gave rise early on to the deistic concept of the clockmaker. God set us to work and then disappeared up there somewhere and left us to it. But I want to show you some things today, because my journey has been in prayer, has been longer than I've been a priest. It started probably while I was still in the Navy, and I was stationed in Scotland back between 1973 and 1975. That's the country of both sides of my family's ancestry. So I, in a sense, was back home and didn't realize it till I explored a great deal. But it was also a place of deep spirituality, the likes of which I had not quite seen growing up as an Episcopalian. I'm a cradle guy. And I wondered why that was. And I began to explore Celtic spirituality, which became sort of a mainframe for some of the other things I would do later on in my seminary studies and ultimately as a priest. So I want to present you, what I want to do is I want to present you with some pictures. I'm not going to spend time on them. I'm going to show them to you, let you see them for maybe 10 seconds. Just frame it in your mind. And it doesn't require anything right now in terms of artistic detail or theology or other things. I just want you to see them and get a sense of what the concept is that I'll talk about on the other end. First picture, I'm going to say, I've never done this before, so I'm going to see how this works. This first picture is a early presentation of Celtic art, pre-Christian. It dates back to about maybe 50 or 60 BC in its first form. This has been a renewed form that is now in a museum in Dublin, Ireland. And that was a Celtic presentation of their spirituality in a sense. You know, what does it look like? And notice that you'll see a flower in the center, a rose or some other kind of flower in the center, and all the filigree around it, the knots as they called them. Okay, think about that. That goes back about a little over 2,000 years. The next one I'm going to present you is a more modern concept of Celtic art, which is about probably this is about 400 AD, but it's much more contemporary. It's a cross, and notice it has a center circle and an outward circle, and all the knots which come together from the different quadrants. It's a Celtic cross, but notice the feature. This is uniquely Celtic. You'll see this in almost all their presentations in Christian art. Okay. All right. The next one I'm going to show you is not Celtic. It is Lakota, Native American. It's called a medicine wheel. And medicine in Lakota or any of the Plains, especially the Plains Indian languages, which is the only thing I'm even a little bit facilitated in, medicine is spirituality. It's very rarely herbs and spices. It's their way of expressing divine presence and divine nature and their own sense of belonging. And so this is a medicine wheel artistically drawn to include how you would maybe put one on you. It's got the knots hanging off of it. A simple circle with the quadrants located and a center. And often there's a circle in the center. This one just happens not to have one. It's not necessarily meaning anything different, just the presentation that I wanted you to see. Lakota, from the time that you see the earliest art that they have until present, it hasn't changed much. Okay, and the next one is Cheyenne. It's Lakota Cheyenne. They're cousins, and this is a medicine wheel in the ground. It is in North Dakota, and it's on top of a hill, a pretty tall hill. That circle is about 100 feet across diameter. Notice it has a center, and it has stones out to the side like sun rays. They go, and it's shaped so. I mean, it's positioned so that the top that you're looking at on this picture is also pointing north and south. They orient their prayer wheels and medicine wheels north, south, east, west. And so this one happens to be facing north. It looks like it's shorter on the north end. It looks like it's off center, but it's just the way the photographer up high took it. It's kind of off to the side. And that you'll see a lot of medicine wheels in the archaeology of the Cheyenne and Lakota people, especially. That's another presentation. And then I want to show you something that's very, very, very current. This is, if you haven't been there, I would suggest you just add it to your bucket list. Notice this. Let me see where there we are. This is the entry rotunda to the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of the American Indian. And what that is a representation of, believe it or not, is the medicine wheel circle.
Oh.
And it's configured artistically, so it's got concentric circles looking at the center. I think I can bring it a little closer without messing myself up. you can see where the window is. That is a window at the ceiling with a light coming in, and it's a more intense medicine wheel. So it's wheels inside of wheels, which is very much, you'll see this in almost every Native American culture. And they put it all together to make a conglomerate presentation of their sense of spirituality and prayer. I'll say more about that in my own experience. That's in Washington, D.C. That's really worth being. Denise and I spent 3 days there in 2015. It's great. Going back to the Celtic for just a moment, I found this a few years ago when I was doing some research. This is a modern tapestry of a Celtic experience of spirituality. Let's see if I can get that. It again is a circle, concentric circles going down to the center with a white circle. Okay. That's Celtic in its design. And then finally, for right this second, let me get these out of the way. I'm in my study upstairs, and some of my things are kind of weird. Finally, the thing I want to do is tie this into a little bit of philosophy.
Fred, you're very muffled right now. You moved something and you're muffled. Your voice.
Fred, your connection is off.
Think about ideals and ideas, and we think about possibilities. But how do we form and shape that? Is it linear? Is it X, in that linear fashion, or is there something much to be who we are? Philosophy underneath our theology, and Mann, who created the Hegelian, what is called the Hegelian dialectic. This is going to be dialectic. It's almost like a spring. Starts at the bottom with a thesis, then it has an antithesis, and then it comes up and has a synthesis, which is the results of combining those two. And then you start all over again, and you keep moving up that spiral as you grow and as you shape yourself or as you experience life. It can be a little bit more complex than that. But again, that's not what my focus is. I just want to show you some of the things that I use and have used. Yeah. That I have used and continue to use as a way of thinking about who I am and how I do prayer. And so let me start by just saying I've been praying certain ways. I've been practicing certain ways of engaging conversation or in presence of holiness or sacredness since before I was in seminary. It was part of what I would call my conversion into that space. I didn't have to come out of Christianity into Christianity. I had to come out of my experience of Christianity into a new experience of that in order for me to understand what vocation was and ultimately become who I am and what I do. And so prayer, like anything else, is for me in the beginning a conditioned thing. Mom and Dad were very involved in the Episcopal Church where I grew up in Winter Haven, which is in the center of this state. And we had nighttime prayers before I go to bed. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. God bless. And you pray for all your family and your folks. Simple prayers. Moving then to Our Father who art in heaven, the Lord's Prayer. Things that, we as young people, my brother and I, could memorize. I went from there to then being part of the St. Paul's life, the Episcopal Church, and learn and getting some experience of what church was like, what the ecclesiastical life was like, and I was always excited about it. And I remember one moment when I was confirmed. I was not quite 12 years old. I was, my birthday is late in the year, so I'm the last person in my graduating high school class to have a birthday before, the end of the year. There's only one person who was younger than that. And they've always called me the baby of the class. But I remember after being confirmed by the bishop on that particular Sunday, when I was that age, my parents were taking my brother and me out to dinner, to celebrate, and going to meet my grandparents and going to have this big, luncheon. And I had this very strange feeling. I was feeling really kind of like I was weaving around. It was just a strange experience after I was confirmed. I leaned over. I always sat behind my dad in the car. I leaned over kind of on his shoulder and I said, "Hey, Dad, something happened. I feel different after I was confirmed." He just looked back and gave kind of a quirky smile of his and said, "I know."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh my goodness." I didn't know what that meant, but come to find out later on, my dad was much more of a mystic than I ever thought he was. But that was kind of who he was. That's my growing up kind of experience, moving in and around and being part of. Later, I went through this process of engaging something. It was during my college time. It was when I had already started the medical school program, and I had this sort of like, I don't know, fight with whatever it was, angelic or whatever it was, in the middle of the night, and having this incredibly painful experience of breaking apart and being put back together. And when I went home, I thought maybe I was getting ill, but when I got home, I knew in my heart I wasn't supposed to be a doctor anymore. I knew I had to do something different and do it quickly. It just was that kind of pressure inside. And I thought it might be anxiety and just about being in med school and being up against all that pressure. But it really wasn't. And the next thing was my dad died when I was a senior in high school, just before graduation. My mom was an RN and a charge nurse at the local hospital. I came home and in the middle of the semester, I mean, like 6 weeks in, and she said, "Why are you home?" And I said, "I've got to talk to you. I've had this experience. I'm broken. I don't know what to do about it." She was a little bit puzzled. And I said, "I know I'm not supposed to be a doctor." And I thought she was going to be very upset because she'd worked very hard with people to help me get prepared to do such a thing. And she just looked at me and sat back and said, "Are you sure?" I thought, here it comes. And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Good. I never thought that your heart isn't about being a doctor. Your heart is too soft. You're okay." And that was it. That was the release. From that point on, and I'm not going to get all into these details, but from that point on, I knew that I needed to be doing something to bring myself closer to the center of what we call to be God. And at first it was linear, like everybody's. Just about, what I was conditioned to do is to pray. And so I prayed to God, I lift up, that heaven is out there, and I need to somehow reach that. I need to bring it down or connect with it. And so I learned all the form prayers of morning prayer and evening prayer and all the kind of prayers that I think would help me out in different situations. So I had this bag and arsenal of prayers that I could just say if I'm in different situations. And I thought that was okay until in seminary I read something, and I learned Greek because we had to, the Koine Greek in which the New Testament is originally written. And I came across Jesus speaking to his disciples and saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And of course, when we read that just in English, we'll think that means the end times are coming soon, that the world's going to end as we know it. Well, that wasn't the meaning at all. the word that says the kingdom of heaven is at hand is a present perfect tense in Greek of it is as close as your hand. You can touch it. It's here. You can, as my mother would call it in medicine, you can palpate it. You know, you can push against it. When I read that, that was another experience of shift. When I realized, well, if I can do that, then is God here? And this required a big leap for me in the logic of faith. It was another step toward God's not up there watching, and I'm gonna fly up there someday when I'm not in this body anymore. It's like the Holy One, the sacred, is right here in my midst. And as I look around, and I suddenly got this sense of like being in this mushy pillow, you know, of feeling of grace and goodness. It was like a door opened when I made that realization. And it was as if something was saying to me, you're getting closer. You're not there yet, but you're getting closer. And I walked with that. I walked with that for a long time, and with spiritual directors. And I always, as a priest, I've always had a psychotherapist and a spiritual director. The psychotherapist, not because necessarily I'm crazy, though I'm probably sometimes a little off the beam, but I always believed very deeply that if I'm going to lead a parish and I'm going to be in the pulpit every Sunday or every other Sunday, or however it works, proclaiming the gospel to these people, I'd better not bring my bag of stuff along. I better not have my sack of mess that becomes part of what I filter through. I need to keep that and know what it is and keep it over here, so that when I give something to my people, I'm giving them as much as I can as a vessel of grace. Because I'm a deeply sacramental person. That was one of the things that emerged in me as part of my journey through seminary and into priesthood. And so I always had a psychotherapist that I could go to, and we talked, and you know, once or twice a month maybe, depending upon what was going on and how much stress there was and that kind of thing. Yeah, there's a spiritual director, and I've had several and they've all been very, very good spiritual directors, who led me through some very difficult times of transition in parochial environments. But mostly what they did was help me rethink and re-image how I was relating to sacred, how I was relating to the holiness of God and of creation. It wasn't until 1999, it was not until then that suddenly I had this big breakthrough. And I had gotten a grant from the Lilly Foundation for a sabbatical. And I hadn't had one yet. And I've been a priest since 1978, and this was 1999. And I had this 6-month sabbatical. And I wrote a thing saying, I want to study not Celtic spirituality, because there were a lot of books being written at that time about Celtic spirituality. I wanted to know who the Celtic people were and what was it that drew them in to Christianity and the sacred so easily. And so I went and studied in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Was able to take my family, so it was a really wonderful kind of experience of both having family with me for that almost 7 weeks, and moving around different countries and studying in different places. It was when I was in Aberystwyth, Wales, that I had Welsh is a difficult language, and I tried before I left to get some sense of it. But they were gracious enough in the National Library in Aberystwyth to give me a graduate student who was working there during the summer who could speak Welsh, to be kind of a partner for me for the 3 days I was there. And I was telling him what I needed and what I was looking for, and he'd bring me these early texts, and then I'd say, tell me where we're going here, and he would start reading it, translating it to me in English. And one day he was saying that there was this particular way of looking at the world in which we step into a space that expands and moves and encircles us, and in enveloping us holds us. And this was, and then there was a piece of art there, of a drawing beside this early text that dated back about 400 years. And it was like a ball. And in the center of it was a cross. And he said, that's the cross of Christ. And this is all that's around it. This draws you to the center. That's where you find, according to this text, he's saying to me, according to this text, that's where you find grace. It's not out here, it's not over there. It's all around you, and it draws you in to a center place. And that place, and I said, where is that place? He said, I don't know, but come back tomorrow. And I did. It was my last day there. And he said, I found something. I was playing around with it for a couple hours after you left, and I found something I thought you might be interested in. He said that the Celtic image of God is an image of presence, created presence. That he said, the Franciscans have it right. He said, we've got it wrong. Those of us who've talked about, naturism and these kinds of things, that, it's wrong to think of God as anywhere else but with us, because we are the ultimate of creation. And if we go to one of the things that the Episcopal Church chants about, let everything that breathes praise the Lord. And he went further than that. He said, what the early Celtic writers were saying, Christians and non-Christians, basically the same thing, just in different language styles, that all of everything reflects and engages the love of God. Everything about our creation is an expression of God's love. And that it exudes it. And the Celtic people could actually engage it verbally as well as within the other senses, sight and sound. And so I said, so the mystical experience, the prayer experience that they were having, was one that led them into a relationship with everything around them. And he was reading along. He says, yes, that's what they're saying here. And I was, as he was reading, I was saying, I have heard this kind of talk before somewhere. And so I wrote some notes in I had this big journal I was keeping, because I had to write a monograph to Lily to show them how I spent their money. And so I wrote this note to myself, check this out. Well, I went back home. I was busy. I did another series of courses on English spirituality at Notre Dame. And then I moved. I left the cathedral in South Bend, Indiana, and went to be the rector of St. Andrews in Kansas City. I got out there, and that was the launching area for the overland trails, the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, all emanated from just north of where the present Kansas City is. And in that, you have all the Native American, all the streets in Kansas City are kind of goofy. They're goofy because they follow Indian trails. The roads were built over where the pathways were that the Native Americans used in moving around with each other, and for hunting, and for doing commerce. And that led me to start reading in my spare time. I live here. I don't know how I always go to a place thinking I'll probably be there forever, but within the first few months after I got settled into my work, I started taking my spare time and reading history of the area, especially Native American history, because there are 2 Indian schools nearby. And there's a whole lot about that. That's a different story. But because of that intensity, I wanted to know more about these people who we supplanted. And I got into that culture. And one day I was reading a piece about the medicine wheel. And here was this language about Wakan Tanka in Lakota and Cheyenne. Wakan Tanka is the Holy of Holies, God. Wakan is holy. Tanka is the great one. And their sense of God was singular, like ours. They didn't have many gods. It was one being who generated itself in all of creation. So you look at everything around you, it is raised up because of God. It is nurtured by the earth, Maka, mother. So there was this symbiosis, this relationship between that which is raised up, which is us and the plants and everything that has life, everything that has being, is this generation by God's love, by Wakan Tanka's presence and loving kindness, and the love of that responsive love of the mother who brings it into fruition. And this is a mainstay of Native American spirituality. Bingo. I had another sabbatical coming, and I said, I know exactly what I need to do. And when it came, I found out that I could write to. I wrote to the Lakota, I wrote to the Navajo, and I wrote to the Cheyenne. The Episcopal Church has relationships with all three of those. And I knew as an Episcopal priest going on a sabbatical, maybe that would be a hook that wouldn't let me get in. And I was told by the Native American person at the desk in 815 New York, our Episcopal Church headquarters, that Native Americans are notorious about answering in their own time because they see the moment as more important. And when that moment's finished, they go to the next thing. So they'll get to you. And so I sort of laid a fleece out and I said, you know, the first Native American group that responds to me is the one I'll go with. Well, I put this email out and detailed what I wanted to do and if it was possible to meet with some people and talk about it. The Lakota got back to me within 5 days, and I never heard from the Cheyenne, and the Navajo people finally did talk to me about a month later. But I went with the Lakota, and the nice thing about that is I can make a 10-hour drive and be right in the middle of the Lakota people in South Dakota and North Dakota, and they invited. I went, and I think the next seminal piece of this is that in order for me to make a sabbatical with them and be amongst them in that way, they're not trusting of white folks for obviously good reasons, but yet they're friendly and they want to engage. But I had been introduced to 3 people who would become my mentors. 2 of them were priests. 1 of them was an archaeologist. The archaeologist who was nearest to me, and he spoke to me. He's the one that engaged me about doing this project. He said, before you can do this, you have to come, excuse me, and spend 4 days with us. You arrange the time and we'll try to fit it. And you got to come and spend 4 days and do what is called a hanblechea. Hanblechea is crying for a vision. That's the translation, cry for a vision. And you need to make the vision quest. We need to see if the spirit of the Holy One wants you here. And if that we call angelic presence, that sense of the host of God who walk among us and around us are satisfied that, and the ones who walk with us as the Lakota people are satisfied that you're coming in for the right reasons, for yourself and for us. And so I came back in October of 2007 and spent 4 days with them. The most important day of it was prayer and fasting, and they led me through a whole series of things. I had 3 people who were with me, a Lakota priest and my archaeology mentor who still is, and one of their friends who helped with the fire and the kind of things that they do in preparation put me up on a hill, and I had to spend a whole night awake on a hill at the top of the Black Hills, in the highest point, in October, the first night of a frost, with nothing but my gym shorts and a blanket, sitting on a buffalo skin, and there was nothing. As I knew it at the time, there was nothing within 2 miles of me on anywhere. And they prayed me into that space. I couldn't leave that space unless I needed to biologically deal with something. But I had to be there. I had to pray my way out and in, but only for that one reason. You got to go to the bathroom. And they said, and we will pick you up at sunrise. And so I did that. It was the longest night of my life. It was the coldest night of my life. It was not frightening, but it certainly was lonesome. It was the loneliest night. I had no way, I'm thinking I have a heart disorder. I said, what if I had a heart attack up here? Nobody'd find me till tomorrow morning. What if there are bears up here? There are coyotes up here. What if one of them got hungry? It's October. And but I was there, and I did exactly what they told me to do, and I did pray. I had 3 very awesome experiences during that long night that I can't describe here. It would take too long. But to say that I had transformational moments in that space during that whole night. The next morning, they came to get me, as they said, at sunrise, just as the sun was coming up over the mountain. The Black Hills, if you haven't been there, that's another bucket list place to go. It's a sacred space. You know it as soon as you hit it. And they literally, there were 2 of them, my mentor and his helper. They had to lift me up because I was cold and I couldn't make my knees open up to stand up. They had to get me all warmed up before I could even go down the hill. And we went into the hut and around the fire, and they asked me to speak to them. They spoke to each other in Lakota. And at the end of my speaking, I thought, I wonder what's going to happen, because the Lakota have emotional ways of doing things. And so they would hear what I experienced, and they would say, oh, huh. And then I told them a particular one that was most powerful to me. And one of them went, uh-huh. Like, oh, I don't know what that means. But at the end, my mentor says, it is very, very true that the Spirit of God wants you here with us when it's time. And so that was transformational. It's to the point that the best time for me to pray to this day, that was in 2007, to this day, I pray best at night, and especially early in the morning. That's why I've always been a morning person, ever since I was a kid. And as a priest, I would say nothing good happens after 8 o'clock, so have these meetings over with police so I can go home. I get up. I've always gotten up very early, and so for me, even now in retirement, getting up at 5 in the morning and sitting in the dark on my lanai is the space that I find the most effusive, in the sense of what comes from me and what comes into me. That space is like that lonesome space, but it's not lonesome. That was the one thing I realized of my biggest experience was I had someone with me. And I could feel it all night. Someone was with me all night on that hill. And that was the thing that the Celtic people were talking about, and now the Native American people. So I had this double entendre of presence and direction. And I realized then for the first time that prayer isn't linear. It isn't one way. It isn't two way. It's multi-way. Just as life for us is multi-way. You know, I'm sitting here looking at you, but I'm also looking at our dog laying over here. And I see all the things around me, my books and my art and, you know, all these kinds of things. And yeah, that's all present around me. Once we realize that it's just not the physical things that are present, but those which support and give energy to those things and to me are around me all the time. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And I think those moments for me have gifted me with this sense of inclusion and how I see myself as a person who loves God, who knows who Jesus is and has experienced that grace and that love, how the Holy Spirit works engaging us. And that brings me to one of the other pictures I have. I don't know if I kept it here or I was showing some stuff to Denise the other night. It may not be here. It's not. But it's a picture of, it's called, don't worry about the word, it's called cosmotheantic. It's the sense that God, creation, and mankind are all bound together in this wonderful dance, in this wonderful sense of being and purpose. That it's like this, not like this, but like this. And it is. The Celtic talked about the eternal dance of love. And the Native Americans dance in a circle around a sacred space and to celebrate that oneness. The medicine wheel brings things into the center and gives you that sense of full purpose. And so everything has become spherical for me rather than linear. And I not only deeply appreciate that, but that's how I live life now. I don't think about linear consequences. Many things can happen. Many possibilities exist. And I think one of the things that I fight with now, there's one person on with us today who would know who knows about this. Well, the thing I fight with the most in prayer is myself, my ego. You know, I'm a psychologist as well as a theologian. I have training in that, and I did have for a while a family license for family therapy, but I let that go several years ago when I got too much to do. And I recognize that, you know, I'm a Jungian kind of person, and I know that the archetypal way of us being who we are as human beings has positioning, but the ego is the one that gives us the direct communication and input and output for all the daily things that happen to us. And so what I've been working on most recently, I mean really recently, is how to have an engagement with the ego that doesn't define the final element of what I need to do or who I am, but only is informing me of what is available to me. And it's the part of me that, you know, if I let it go, is pretty intensely egotistical. That's the word. It's self-centered. If one goes into this kind of prayer where one goes to the heart, goes to the center of the circle, one finds that there is a self with a capital S that answers another thing in it that Jesus said. What would it mean to gain the whole world at the cost of, and in Greek it comes out, true self? And that's the self with a capital S, the one that gives us being. And in theology, we call it the ontological core, the core that makes us uniquely human. It is the one that God breathed into, the breath of God, the Ruach, the Holy Spirit is the Ruach of God. Breathed into us to give us this unique ability to be present to, cognizant of, and engagement capable of the world around us. I'm going to finish with a story. And now maybe I'm gone just a little long, but I'm going to tell you a story that proved to me what my mentors, my Lakota mentors, and what my reading and what my prayer life, how it got used practically one day. There is, just off of the Black Hills around Sturgis, between Rapid City and Sturgis, South Dakota, this, in the middle of the plains, this mountain, it's a small mountain, it's 1,200 feet high. It's called Bear Butte, Mato Paha. And it's been there ever since for eons. It was part of a potential volcanic eruption that just brought this rock up, and it stayed there. And it's been the sacred space for the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, a number of Native American cultures for at least 10,000 years. There's lots of archaeological evidence for that. And it's so sacred that you go up with permission. It's now a state park and an historical landmark, and you go up, but you have to sign in to go up. And one of the things, every time I go up there, and I've been going up every year until I started having joint replacements, every year to spend time with the Lakota and do more research in hopes of putting something in print eventually. And they say, you've got to make a pilgrimage. You've got to get in touch with the fullness of spirit before you go to work with us each time. One of the ways to do that is to go to the top of Matopaha, Bear Butte. And it's a winding trail that goes up and over rocks and over things. And you finally get up to 1,250 feet, and you can look down. They've built a platform where you can look out and spend time praying. And I go up there, and they always tell me, go up there, pray your way up. You know, you must pray your way up. The Lakota tell me, pay attention, be prayerful, be obviously respectful of the sacredness of this mountain. So I was doing this, and I was doing fine for several years. I'd always come down, I'd be tired, exhausted, but yet I would be fulfilled. Something would shift a little bit and open up what I was there to do for the next week or two. But this one time, I took a friend with me from Kansas City who is much a part of all of the kinds of things like this. And Don was with me, and we got to go up, and I had talked to my mentor, Ben, and I said, we're here. And he said, yeah, are you going to do your pilgrimage before you come see me? Yes, sir. And so we started up. Now, I've been having trouble with my knees. This was 2015. I was having trouble with my knees, and they were hurting. And we started up. And Don was a little bit ahead of me. He's 8 years older than me, but he was at that time in better shape than me, knee-wise anyway. And we started up. And on my way up, I was just thinking about me. I was thinking about, I hurt. My knees hurt. My back hurts because I'm walking funny with my knees. I'm tired. It's warm. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. You know, it's a me thing. And I'm going up, and I'm saying, all right, I'm doing this, you know. Don is behind me on this first part. I'm walking up these thin trails that are less than 2 feet wide on these rock screes. And, you step off and you're going to go tumble. And all of a sudden I hear this rattle. Now, I used to collect snakes as a teenager, but I knew that rattle. That was a rattlesnake. And I looked down, and I was about 2 feet from a coiled up rattlesnake, about 3 or 4 feet long. They tell us that ground rattlers are there. But in all the time I'd been going up since 2008, I had never seen one. up and down every year until 2015. And suddenly here's this snake in front of me. And Don bumps into me and says, "Why'd you stop?" And I said, "Look over my shoulder." And he said, "But God, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm not sure yet." And I'm holding a staff that I have, a walking stick. And I'm standing there and I feel like Moses a little bit with this walking stick. What do I do? With the stick. And all of a sudden it came to me. And it was sort of like the Spirit saying, "You're an idiot. Don't you know why you're here?" And I thought to myself, and I said, "I haven't been here. I've been inside my head. I've been complaining. I've been all about talking about me, not praying, not opening, not being part of this. I've just been in my own head." And I looked down at that snake, and suddenly I didn't see the snake so much as I saw a sacred being. And I looked at it and I said, "I'm sorry. I have abused the privilege of being able to be here by not praying my way here, but thinking only of my own needs and being very selfish. And I want to do better. And I will promise you that as I get to the top, I will spend time in prayer and I'll treat this as the space it should be." I no sooner finished saying that than the snake uncoiled and went off into the rocks. And Don said, "I don't know what you just did, but okay." We went up to the top. We spent time together. We prayed. We talked. We engaged one another. He and I are old friends through some mutual spiritual direction. And we started down. And I'm feeling really good. I mean, my knees don't hurt anymore. I'm happy. Don goes ahead of me about 20 feet. I'm going down. And in the Navy, we call it diddy bopping. I was, oh boy, I said, I wonder where I'm going to take Don to lunch. There's some great places to eat between here and Rapid City. And I'm just enjoying and I'm just reveling in my feeling. All of a sudden, I look down. This is a bigger snake. It's coiled. I almost stepped on it. I mean, I was like this, and here it was, and I backed up and I took a step back. I know enough about snakes to know how did Don ahead of me get over this snake? Because there's not enough room to go around it. This is a narrow path. And I stopped and I started just having tears for no reason. And I said, "I am an idiot. I didn't have to hear it. Look at what I'm doing." I said I would be in a sacred space. I would treat it in a sacred way. I would come up in a sacred manner. And here I am laughing and singing and skylarking and not paying attention to the needs of being here and what it can do for me and not for it in this symbiosis. And I spoke then and I said, "I am truly shouldn't be here because haven't been prepared. I haven't prepared myself. And here I am, and I'm doing it again. This time in joy, but still, I'm not paying attention. I'm not praying my way in and out. And I apologize. And I know that you represent the ancient ones of this mountain, the holy ones whose spirit still resides here from the eons of prayer and sacrifice. I don't want to abuse that, and I apologize for its abuse on my part. I want to be able to do it right, and maybe I've learned something, I hope, from this time. And I was standing there, and the snake raised its head. I mean, it really did. It raised its head, looked square at me, and I've never had a snake do that before. Looked square at me, and just stared for like maybe a minute. And then it eased down and kind of cocked its head a little bit, uncoiled and went into the rocks. And I'll tell you exactly what I said to myself. I said, "Damn, I have just had a moment of theophany, a moment where everything I've read from the Celtic and Native American traditions says to me, God is present in everything, and the Spirit is present in this sentient being that confronted me to give me a message that I need to be in a particular frame of being in order to be able to communicate and pray well. I went down the mountain. I caught up with Don. I said, Don, you stepped over a snake. He said, I did not. But I've been watching that trail. So that snake had to coil up within 20 seconds. Yeah, I've watched the snake coil up. It takes a little more than 20 seconds. I don't know how it did that. I'm not, and then that's the inexplicable stuff. But what I'm trying to point out here at the close is that we have a symbiosis because everything is created in the image of God. And with that Spirit walking with us and through us, that constructs and holds my prayer life. And so I think I'm going to stop there because it could go on for a while. And I know I've used up a little bit of time. Yep. Open for questions.
Thank you so much, Fred. If you would like to ask questions on the bottom of your screen, if you have a PC, on the bottom of your screen, there's a thing called reactions. You can raise your hand, or you can just raise your hand. Make sure you unmute yourself before you ask.
Marion has her hand up.
Yep.
Oh,
Hi, Fred, thank you for a wonderful talk. I really feel very in sync with what you've said throughout the whole thing. I had a talk with Donna yesterday, and we were talking about much the same thing, including Jung. But one of the things that I wanted to comment on was that your prayer life seems to focus on the unity, not the duality. And because in our Christian tradition, the snake is evil. But in what you're saying, the snake takes on the holy function. And so what I really like is this sense of mystery that we can't explain, that we can't even really talk about. But nevertheless unifies us with God's pure love, where nothing is evil. There is no evil or good, love or hate. And I think your story so exemplifies how something that has been considered evil in our culture, in our religion, takes on the holy function. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. It was really a most interesting talk. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Let me say two things about that, because that's a good point. I tried to engineer this talk to be tight, but it's kind of hard to keep tight when the things are there. But one of the things that I found, both in the Celtic tradition and within the Lakota tradition, neither of them have a hard and fast concept of evil. In the Celtic tradition, they talk about brokenness. They talk about being bent, which means you're out of that relationship with the Holy One, with God, and you focused on something else, and that bends you, pulls you away. That's much more in keeping with a lot of the other stuff that I've read. In the Lakota tradition, they have a trickster. They don't have an evil one. They don't have a persona that is like a devil. But they do have a trickster, one that wants to pull you off course. Mm-hmm. It's called Iktomi. Now, it just so happens also that Iktomi's the spider. That's the name for a spider. Well, that works for me because I have arachnophobia. And, you're a spider. You go away. I don't want you with me. And they knew that in the Lakota. The one thing I didn't tell you was Every time I go up there, I pray my way in to the Black Hills. As soon as I get off the highway and I start going into the roads that lead up into the hills, I pray my way in. Every time I have been there, every single time I have been there, and it's been 9 times that I've been there over the years, and I am at some level confronted with a spider, and the spider disappeared. You know, I'll say the first time. First time it happened, I had been working hard in my parish in Kansas City. I got up there and I was kind of rifled out, and I got up in the morning to take a shower. I pulled the shower curtain back, and here's this web with this spider about that big, you know, maybe an inch across, dangling in that web, a black spider. And I said, oh, no, no, no. I am not sharing the shower with you. I am going to make sure you don't share anything with anybody. And in the 10 or 12 seconds it took me to go across the bathroom, grab a wad of toilet paper, to come back and put this spider out of its misery and mine, it wasn't there. And there was no web. I hunted for that spider for 20 minutes. I went through everything. No spider. Every time I have been there, that's been the kind of experience I've had with the spider. And when I told my mentor that, Ben, when I told Ben that, he's actually a shaman. He's the archaeologist, but he's actually a shaman. He's a medicine man. And he said, what did you learn from that? And I said, to pay attention. Pay attention to what? Pay attention to where I'm at. Yes. Pay attention to where you're at. You're here for a reason. Put the rest of it in a bag and leave it outside. That was the learning. Every time I'm there, and I've got to the point now where I'm making friends with those spiders. The very last time I was there was in 2016, and there was a little spider that right next to the bathtub. And I said, okay, here's the deal. You stay there, I stay here. I'll do my thing, you do your thing. That spider stayed there all the week I was there. I was there 8 days. That little spider was always there in that little corner. And it never disappeared. And I thought, oh, okay, you're the real deal. I'm okay with you. I don't like you, but I'll stay. You stay there, I'll stay here. The last day I was there, that spider was gone. I figured, well, you know, it's gone. It's not getting what it needs here. It's going somewhere else. But when I opened the curtain, there in the corner was this bigger spider, and I could see its eyes. And I said, oh. And I went into the other room to get something. I came back and it was gone. Never found it. And it was like that spiritual sense saying, I'm still around. Don't get too comfortable. You know, it's always been, and it's become this kind of give and take. It's strange. But what I'm trying to get at there is, that which we perceive as evil as a metaphor, and that which was given as a metaphor, because, you know, the asp, the snake, can be pretty harmful sometimes. But we lock that in, and these other traditions have not locked that in. They don't look at evil as a hardcore thing. They look at us as something we engage, and that we're as much a part of making as it's there to be.
Any other questions or comments? You're muted, Donna.
Okay,
There
I've
you
got
go.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Thank you, Fred. This was a very enlightening presentation. Thank you. I really appreciate your sharing about your journey, and it was primarily about your spiritual journey to me, but I also saw within that some psychological understandings. And I just want to comment on one thing about that. And that is that you said that you, through your career, have had a spiritual advisor and a psychotherapist through your life. And I think I really am grateful that you said that. I too believe in the power of psychotherapy, even when there's nothing really wrong that's tearing you up. I think it's a part, for me, it's a part of the inner journey that includes psychological understandings and psychotherapy and spiritual work. And it can have a lot to do with wellness, psychotherapy, as well as illness. And I thank you so much for your sharing today, and especially for that statement. And that's very affirming to me personally. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's I guess I did a lot of different things over the years to try to make sure that who I was and what I do didn't cross in terms of the things that that had conditioned me that didn't serve me well, and the things that I picked up and thought I could use didn't serve me well, and it could get me in trouble if I'm not careful, because I'm a human being, and I've been around a lot of different kinds of people and picked up a lot of different kinds of stuff, some of which I've taken on, and some of which I've rejected. And I have found over the years that some of those things I took on were really not good for me at all. Like smoking's not good for me, drinking too much is not good for me. Those are obviously physical things. There's behavioral things that can be just as toxic. And if I'm carrying those with me and they somehow get latched on to how I'm studying my spirituality, and I'm looking at that, I'm trying to turn that into something I can share with people. If that's connected to it, it's going to be toxic, potentially. So I've got to do as much as I can to stay within the framework of being the kind of person that can be trusted to tell the truth and to have information that is as clean and as well-meaning and as useful as possible. It's a hard job. Sometimes I find myself, when I was in parish work, Sunday morning I, would have had some things going on at home or with the kids or something, or I'd have an issue that something had come up, and I was carrying this. I was like tense, bit angry, bit upset, bit put off. But if I get into the pulpit and I start talking, and that stuff kind of bleeds out in some ways, that's just not going to be good. So I really have to take myself down. And I learned ways to do that. And I've been very blessed with the idea that I could walk into the pulpit, talk to people, or be in my office counseling people, or at the hospital bedside, wherever I'm at, and do those things as purely within the context of what God's doing through me. The one thing I learned sacramentally that drives that is that it's not me doing the Eucharist. I'm going to be doing the Eucharist next Sunday at 10 o'clock with Wayne. I'm going to be the presider who's preaching. And it's going to be me at the altar. It's going to be me saying the words. I am not making Eucharist. The Holy Spirit is making Eucharist. I am the vessel for that grace. That's what I do. That's what ordination gives me the ability to do, to be the presence of Christ's love to the community I serve. And I had an older priest tell me at the time I was ordained in 1978. He said, if you ever go to the altar and you're not terrified, leave. You're in the wrong place. We always go to the altar. Very nice.
Fred, I lived in Tucson for many years. I went there for my graduate work and was a trained therapist. And I did shaman training there. And I want you to know that the Tohono Nation has the same kind of medicine wheel. They have the same kind of beliefs. Back there is a closet And I have my shaman blanket that I use. It's red, that my trainer made for me. And I've had such similar experiences with the natural world and the animal world as you're talking about. I remember when I first moved here, ants were a problem. There were ants everywhere in my house. And I went, what am I going to do? So I prayed about it and I prayed about it. And I sat down in the kitchen and I had a conversation with the ants. And I said, I want you to know there's water here. There's food that I'd rather you don't touch. You can come here as much as you want. Just don't ever let me see you. And you know, I never saw another ant in that house. I know they were there, but I never saw them.
Yeah, I was up in the. It's crazy.
They're part of creation. Who said that ants or scorpions are bad? Who made that up? Who said that rattlesnakes are? God created the whole thing. And God didn't make anything. God hasn't created anything that's not good.
Yeah. I took a friend when I was in the Black Hills one year. I stay in the center of the Black Hills. There's an education center there run by a retired Episcopal priest, a woman. And she lets me stay in one of the cabins when I'm up there. And I'd taken a friend up to there's a fire tower near where she lives. You go up another 100 feet. It's about 12,000 feet there. It's about 11,000, I guess. And so it's thin air. And we walked up there, but there are all these kind of flies and gnats and stuff up there at this time of the year. And you know, we were doing this kind of thing. And he and I were talking, and I was explaining what was out there. And I got a little kind of annoyed with the gnats hitting me in the eyes and stuff. I said, can you just leave me alone for a while and let me finish this? And they didn't bother me anymore. They were still bothering him, but they didn't bother me anymore. And I thought, and he looked at me and said, how'd you do that? And again, I don't know. I mean, I had a conversation and, you know, I don't know. But I have a feeling that because we're in symbiosis, maybe there's some level of communication and energy that makes that work. That's part of creation.
The other thing that I really remember from my training with him is we were talking and he said, I was talking about therapy and how I'll be in a therapy session with somebody and I'll ask a question or I'll make a comment and I'll go, I don't know where that came from. Doesn't have anything to do with anything that I was trained by. No experience of mine can connect with that. And here's the question that came to my mind. Where did that come from? And he said, it's because you're, as a therapist, you're like a corn stalk. It's hollow on the inside. And the power comes from above and it goes through you, through the corn stalk. It has nothing to do with your ego. It has nothing to do with your training. It has to do with connecting with a power much, much greater than we are.
Yeah.
God is working for you.
And my mentor, the priest mentor that I have in the Lakota community, is a retired educator, professor, and he's an Episcopal priest. And his favorite way of metaphor, being a metaphor for that is we're hollow bones for the grace of God.
Yeah.
We're a hollow bone.
Thank you so much.
Vince and Betsy have their hand up.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, I had
I didn't see it.
much of what I've discussed here today keeps bringing me back to meditation. I think, as a Christian, that's not a form of getting inside that we've ever learned. And thankfully, through Michael's efforts and others at the church, we now experience that and have an opportunity to do it. And I think, that's part of this panentheism. I feel whole and part of the world when I'm at that state. And when I'm not, I find myself trying to control things. You know, the world outside and all the things that we go through, we try to control. My current health situation, you know, certainly I think I'm going to be able to figure it out. Well, that doesn't work. And I found that following God, let God lead us, and getting inside into your spiritual self are the two things that really do put us in a better place.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
great talk.
And one of the things I learned as a result of all of this, one of the things I've come to, how many of you are familiar with that that saying that was really much out there? The Desiderata, walk placidly amidst the toil and haste, is the way it begins. It goes on and on for a while. It's a whole page thing that was put out, and I used to have that up in my room at the University of Florida as a way of thinking about, you know, how I'm getting through this. But one of the things that seems to happen as we go deeper, and that was the last thing I was going to show you, by the way. I decided to try to figure out how to draw our spirituality, and that's what I came up with. It's really quite strange. Let me see if I can get it this center. Everything's backwards. There we go. The top is our external. That's what we think, what we feel, what we see, how we engage the world around us. Then there is a gap, a little tiny gap there, which is that space that moves us into the unconscious, which is the below part. And in that space, we go down to that point where we are in the full presence of God completely. But all of those things that happen to us inside as we experience the healing grace that Vince was talking about, you know, it's all in there. All that material is in there. And that space that's in between, that's kind of looks like the break between the two pyramids, that's what I call the ego. That's the place that actually communicates. You know, if you look at it from a computer standpoint, you've got what's in front of the screen, and then you've got what did they used to call it? You're an IT guy, Rick. What's the space? What brings us all up? What brings all the digital stuff and makes it full? It's DOS, a disk operating system. You know, the disk operating system is the ego of the computer. It brings everything from what is nothing but digital electronics into full-scale pictures and other things that we use on the front end of the computer. You know, and I think the ego, I like to think of the ego sometimes when I talk to people, especially kids who are, you know, in school and they're learning this stuff. I say, you know, your ego is the one that sort of puts things up on the front. How sturdy is it? How informed is it? Have you let stuff sneak from underneath to inform you? And that's where we can get into some kind of spirituality.
Mhm. Mhm. I have a question. So in your journey, and I'm not necessarily talking about a retreat situation or something as formal as that for going inward, but have you experienced times, or in terms of time, do you experience sometimes that are more like a quickening of your understanding of your awareness of your own, what Jung calls unconscious? I've recently been ill. I've been staying at home for 2 weeks, pretty much. And I found that during this time I was reading deeply, I was praying, I was meditating, And I've had this amazing kind of dream life. And I remember my dreams better in the morning. And the dreams indicate to me that I'm having a breakthrough from the unconscious, from watery dreams that also have mounds of land in them. And I've had several profound dreams that I've analyzed with an Enneagram person and a psychotherapist. And I'm finding this, at any rate, a time of quickening that may have to do with my being still for a whole two-week period. Have you experienced those kind of times?
Yeah, I have. They come in packets for me. I was on retreat at the first part of May for 5 days at St. Leo's Abbey, and I was by myself. There was no one else in the guest house that week, and it was. I'm an introvert by nature, and at one time thought I might become a convinced as well. But the thing that I experience sometimes in that space where I'm alone, or I'm I'm supposed to be somehow still. Like when I had my knees replaced and shoulder replaced, and I had to be in one place for a couple, 3 weeks. I found those times to be times where I could sink in and listen and hear. I mean, hear with a different kind of tonality. And those are profound moments. I wish they happened more often. My dream life has been kind of goofy. That's something I'm working on now. That's a whole different story. But my dream life has been, I don't know, strange. But yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and yes, those are important times.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Vince was talking about that. Now he's parked there, and he's saying, I go where God is with me, and find that comfort and find that sense of encouragement.
Yes. Good connection. Marion?
Yes, I'm playing around with symbolism, Fred, a little bit. And I thought of the snake and the story of when things were matriarchal. There was this fertility goddess who had beautiful hair. When the patriarchy took over, they turned her into Medusa, where her hair became snakes, and anyone who looked at her became stone. So I thought it was interesting that when you were in your ego and your masculine self, you heard a snake talking to you who might have been really, in another guise, a fertility goddess to your spiritual path. I'm just playing here. And then the other one is the spider, which, as you know, are the fates that weave things together. They're feminine, but you didn't like those spiders. Your masculine side might not have liked those spiders. And so what I'm wondering is, as you and we, because I feel very, very empathetic with what you described this morning, whether we, as we proceed, move into a holistic way so that nothing is Medusa or the fates become negative and evil, but rather we're joining all of this in an integrated wholeness. So I was just and you're opening more to your feminine side because you're seeing these things. So I just wondered what you thought about my playing with that. Does it make sense to you, or maybe not?
Yeah, I can say it makes sense, because I'd go into another story, and I notice we're losing people, so I don't want to go into too much story. But I think, I am very well aware in terms of my studies of Jungian psychology and my own research, that the intuitive element of the self, the left brain, right brain, playing with that. My right brain is what empowers what I do in terms of creating sermons, creating talks, creating thoughts, creating anything that comes up, and that's the feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And the extroverted side, that's the one that does a lot of the detail work. I can tell when I've learned to tell where I am, and if Denise says to me, and she knows me, we've been married 42 years, and she knows me, she says, what head are you in right now? Well, she knows all week I've been working on this, so she knows where my head's been. He said, can I bother you for a minute for some business? And I'll kind of look at her, and she said, are you ready? I said, yeah, okay, go ahead. We've got that kind of, playbook. And, but I do know, and I'm not going to tell you another story, but I will tell you that early on in our marriage, within the first month of our marriage, I had a dream that scared the living Jesus out of us, if that is such a word. It came 3 different times, and it was me and a spider who was very feminine, very seductive, in a dream in which we met and talked daily until the one time I came and I had a load of books under my arm coming from school, and she stepped out from behind this oak stump where she lived, and she said, can we talk? And I said, can't you see I'm really busy? I can't talk. Turned to go away. It crushed the back legs of her back legs. And I heard her scream, and I turned around and I said, what do I do? What do I do? I didn't mean this. I'm sorry. He said, no, we're okay. You and I are okay, but I've got to punish you.
I've got to what?
I've got to punish you. Oh. She's up on her front legs chasing me into my house, and I wake up screaming. And my brand new wife is saying, I've married somebody who's crazy. And I did go talk to a psychiatrist about that, a friend of mine who was Jungian trained. And I told him the whole story of the dream. It gets very complex, and I just summarized it. And I told him the dream, and he looked back and he looked at me and he said, you've been to Westlake, haven't you? And it's in Orlando. We were living in Orlando. In Orlando Regional Medical Center has the Westlake Mental Health Center next to it. And I said, yeah, I've been over there. He said, you're going to be a patient there if you don't do something pretty quick. And I said, I'm brand new married. I can't do this. And he said, no. He said, you can fix it. And he told me what he said. You in the 6 months before you got married, the rector was on sabbatical, and you were the rector for those 6 months. And you're getting ready to get married. You've been doing all this stuff to get ready to get married. You've been doing your own stuff that you do as part of the parish. You've been nothing but a left brain machine. Yes. And you neglected your right, the feminine aspect that gives you all the stuff that makes you who you are when you're being creative and loving and caring and all that stuff. He said, you better get back in touch with that. And he gave me a few things to do. Ultimately, it worked out, and I never had a dream again. But my point being is, yes, I really agree that we have this capacity, and we have a history. We have a history of blocking out parts of us that we think are weak or unuseful. And I think we can see evidence of where that is right now in our culture.
good conversation.
Very good.
So do you think we should disband at this point? I hate to, but we probably should, since people are needing to leave.
Yeah, I do. I have things I can do. Like I said, I don't have any plans, but I'm happy to be with you. And I'm grateful that Michael and Rita asked me to come be with you today and to share some stuff.
Thank you so much for taking us on your journey.
Thank
Fred.
Yes.
More-
Look forward to seeing you around
Tomorrow.
Yes, and
I
I hope that at some point you'll come back and share some more.
Sure.
And
Happy.
I will let you know when the recording gets posted. I'll get an email probably in the next few days that says that it's available. So I will let you all know that it's available if you want to either hear it or see it again, or refer other people to it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
bless
so much.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.